Well, welcome back. Hey, we just keep multiplying people on the show. By the time it hits midnight, you won't be able to move in here. We're doubling every time we go on. So, at any rate, we have our standby with our Hawaiian, at least our Hawaiian shirt, Ray Michaels.
Hello.
We have Randy Pullen, formerly of the state GOP leadership and a member of the RNC and the audit guru, I guess we call you now. I don't know what's the title. What's the title?
I'm just, I guess, just part of the liaison team for the Senate.
Okay,
technically.
He's the liaison, Randy
Part of
liaison.
Ken
And then this
Ken Bennett, myself.
and then this good-looking guy here with the beard is it's Alex Kolodin, new daddy. He just we had scheduled him one night about a month ago, I guess. And he called up and he says, "We're having a baby."
Sorry, Ron, can't make it on the show. Wife went into labor early. You know how it is.
So we finally got you. Congratulations.
And Ron said, "What do you mean? You can't make the show?" Wait,
Yeah.
I don't
I know
make the show. Set your priorities.
He did say
Priorities.
that. And I asked Honey, is it okay if I go on? You're probably not going to deliver till tomorrow. You should have seen the look that I got.
Oh.
But I tried, Ron. I really did.
I know. I'm just one of those kind of guys. I'm a tough master.
You are.
So, at any rate, we're here with him, and we have the sign on the monitor: "Do not tap on the table," because Alexander is just the prince of a man,
He's a passionate man.
and he bangs on this table. I'm afraid it's going to collapse right before you on the tube.
If you don't have passion, what do you have?
That's right.
Come on.
That's
Well,
right.
you have been very, very involved over the last 6 months in the election process. You've been down there.
Year and 6 months.
I was going to say before that, this
Yeah.
is what I want to get to. You have done a few things with Mr. Fontes. Now, Fontes, for those of you that don't know, Mr. Fontes was the Maricopa County recorder. And he was, I think, a little less than discreet in the way he handled that job. And Alexander, you went after him a couple of times. You even took him to the Supreme Court.
I did.
Tell us about that little process, if you don't mind.
Well, it was back when he was trying to tell voters that it was okay to cross out mistakes on your ballot. So basically, every ballot that would have happened to would have gone through the adjudication process. And he, in his typical Fontes fashion, sort of seemed to acknowledge that it was illegal, but said, we need to do it anyway because of COVID, which tends to be the county's excuse for a lot of things. The Arizona Supreme Court, of course, didn't see it that way, but I guess he didn't learn his lesson because he's running for Secretary of State now. So,
Well, it's interesting in that he did lose the election, and now he's going for higher office. So I guess that's one of the.
he must have made some of the right people into allies, I suppose.
Oh, boy.
Don't you rise to the level of your
incompetence.
That's right.
Now tell us, there was a time here, and it didn't get a lot of play, but where Mr. Fontes actually, I believe, had like $300,000 worth of ballots printed up, and was going to just send them to everybody, whether you ask for a ballot or not.
Yeah, Berno popped him for that. That was right before our APIA versus Fontes case. And that was another time when he said, it's probably illegal, but, COVID.
Well, what's funny is they ran out of ballots, the actual paper during the election, and now we know where they went.
Well, it was funny when we had our so-called Sharpiegate case, right? What the county's election day director testified on the stand is, because we were trying to figure out, is we knew this problem happened, right? We knew these machines were spitting out some ballots, right, and that they weren't reading them right. With the county denied. We got him on the stand, and I thought he was just going to deny. He goes, well, what actually happened? It wasn't the Sharpies. We just printed some ballots crooked. I'm like, okay, well, that actually explains it. And so when I was listening to the audit hearing and hearing, how using the Sharpies could compound calibration problems, I go, well, that would make sense. If you're already starting with crooked ballots and now you've got a calibration problem, of course you're going to have misreads. It's kind of interesting.
I love that word, crooked. I wonder if that was
we just printed
something in the foreseeable future.
Printed some crooked ballots.
But it's almost as some of the people there in elected positions have just a laissez-faire attitude about it. Well, okay, there's it doesn't really mean that much. We can do that. It's not that important. do you find that was the case?
Yeah, that was always the case with the county. Is they just seem to think that they could do whatever they wanted, and half
Wasn't
the time
that
they're
important?
right. Yeah,
right.
whatever.
Who's gonna check?
Who's gonna check?
Yeah. Wow.
Now, we've gone through a litany of things here, but I did want to spend, Randy, just a few minutes talking about some of the things that I heard while I was watching the hearings the other day. Very, very interesting hearings, and of course we've also seen how the media, if you can call them that, reacted to some of the issues, and we visited there a little bit, Randy. But here's one of the first findings that I was kind of surprised at, and once again, folks, nobody is saying, at least at this point, they're looking for explanations as to why, not that this is the final result of the audit. But there were 74,243 ballots returned with no indication that they had ever been sent out. So in other words, if they had 1 million ballots that were asked to be sent out, they got 1,774,243 ballots back. And they're looking for answers to that.
So what could be a couple of the scenarios that something like this would happen?
Well, let's ask Randy.
Okay.
Well, really, it kind of comes back to early voting. So you could go in and vote before Election Day for an early vote, and you would get basically your ballot, okay, and you would vote it, and you would fold it up, and you would then give it to them. Okay, well, there's no indication on that ballot whether it was a mail-in ballot or whether it was an early vote that was done at a voting center. Okay, so again, that's the confusion. Okay, so really what Cyber Ninjas was asking for is some clarification on that, because again, it goes back to, if the county is not cooperating when you're doing the audit, then things like this are going to appear, and you're going to have to get an understanding of that.
So is it possible that I could go in for early voting, and then I receive a ballot in the mail, and I can fill out the ballot and send it in again? Would that have come up during this audit process?
Well, potentially. I don't know if we have any proof of anything like that, but that is a possibility.
Okay. Because
Now,
it would show that you had more. You had one that I did there and one that I received and signed. I mean,
now here's one of the things that really bothered me a great deal. And Randy, we talk about control mechanisms, and that's the whole thing, If they printed 2 million ballots, we want to know where each one of those 2 million ballots was, is, and now is, so that we still have 2 million accounted for. And that's part of a process of controls. It's called control. So we've seen the county talking about their routers and how they don't want to allow the routers out. They don't want to give passwords out because they're afraid that other information will be garnered from that. Well, we already know that that's not what a router does. It just connects to, routes a call from one place to another, or a message from what, doesn't tell what the message is. It just says Ron called Randy. It doesn't say what Randy and Ron talked about. And these things have only so much storage space. And it seems like in March of this year that in one day they got 37,646 security queries, which moved the data on the servers off the servers. They couldn't hold all that information, and apparently it took the oldest material or data off, so it could not be found. Now that's a heck of a lot of security queries in one day.
What is, first of all, for everybody and for myself as well, what is a security inquiry? What is that?
I'm not sure what a security query is, other
do you
than
know what that is?
somebody tapping into the system.
From a security
Do you know?
standpoint?
Do you know
Alex,
more about that?
do you know,
Randy?
I don't really know specifically what that is.
Okay.
But at any rate,
It seems like a lot of traffic for one day or.
And
or
what
a
it
short
seems to
period
have
of time.
done is moved the information that they were really looking for, what happened on
Purposefully
election day
purging
and
off.
election week.
Right.
It removed it from the queue.
Okay,
That's what it appears to be.
right.
And then, of course, the next question as an auditor that I would want to know is, who were these 37,646 individuals or whoever was moving these things through? Why was it so heavy traffic in one day? That's what I'd want to know. What do you think, Alex?
You got me.
Well, I tell you, one thing you'd want to know is if it all came from the same device.
Right.
And if it was the same password. Oh, wait a second. They're
We
all
don't
using
know
the
the
same
password, but we don't know the password. Only Dominion knows the
Right,
password.
but they're all using the same password. So who do we know who it was anyway?
And then there was another thing that was one that really upset me to start with because I've been involved in the political process here, and that is that they had 3,981 people that voted that had registered to vote after registration closed. These people should not have been given the right to vote because they missed the deadline for voting, but they were still given the right to vote. And I might add, they were given an extension to start with, Randy, which I thought was wrong. When the legislature comes out and says you have to be registered by September 30th, that doesn't mean October 1st.
And who authorized that extension?
I think a court did, as I recall.
Basically, the Ninth Circuit ratified it when they otherwise overruled the District of Arizona in the Mi Familia Vota case. Sorry, I gotta pronounce it right.
I didn't know you spoke
Hola.
French.
Don't speak
I thought it was
French.
Portuguese.
Portuguese.
I speak the language of the two countries that consistently whip the French, right? Mexico and then us. So I go up the food chain a little bit.
Now this next finding was really mind-blowing. There were 11,326 people who voted that were not on the rolls November 7th, but were on the voting rolls December 4th. So how does you have that many people? And remember, Biden only won by 10,496 votes, I believe. And you got 11,000 people that voted but were not on the rolls on election day, but were later on the voter rolls December 4th. Kind of an interesting...
How does something like that happen, Randy?
Well, Alex, they were allowing people to register up to win.
It depends on the county, if I recall correctly. Like some of the but I guess it doesn't matter because we're dealing with Maricopa.
We're dealing only with Maricopa County, so it wouldn't matter which county.
So that what would have gotten cut off before? I don't know the exact date, but I thought the way that the results came back was the other way around. There were people who were on the rolls on election day who were off by December 7th. Do I have that?
And
incorrect?
that's the
Yeah.
next
Oh,
point.
That's the next point.
There were 18,000 people that voted and then were removed
Well, you see,
off
but
the
that's-
rolls after the
That's
election.
why we need to see their controls and their chain of custody, because let's assume that it's possible they might have come in and registered on the last day they could do that, and the county just didn't get around to putting them on the list until after the election because they were busy. I'm going to give them that potential break because I don't know, because they're not providing information that you need in order to understand the
Well,
situation.
in that case, quite frankly, I understand why the Board of Supervisors isn't. And you and I discussed this a little bit, so we're going to come up with a conclusion here. Let me talk about a couple more things, then we'll come up with the real conclusion here. And you, Ray, you already know some of it because I have already said it was dereliction of duty when they chose Dominion, because the whole state of Texas said, we're not going with Dominion because they're not secure.
Yeah.
And
Well, but let me just give you one example. If I walk into the poll and ask to vote a ballot, and they say, well, we don't see you on the list, you're not a registered voter in your precinct, you can say, well, I did register the vote, and so they give you a provisional ballot to vote. Okay, then later, if they show that you, in fact, had registered timely, then they could say it was a valid vote.
well, it was interesting. Mr. O'Connor here was registered to vote. I know because I registered him to vote. And his name is something like Michael J.
Sure.
O'Connor. but when he wrote the J, it looked like an A. And they challenged his vote. He was registered as Michael A. O'Connor, and he registered as Michael J. O'Connor, something to that effect. And we had to perfect that. We had, I think, 7 days after the election to perfect it. And we went down and proved that, I said, I'm the one who registered him. Here's this, and here, and gave the signature, and it was okay. But in fact, he was registered. They just challenged it.
So when it is a provisional ballot, is that put in a separate area to count, or does it get mixed in with the regular ballots?
It's separated.
Okay. All right.
Of course, we already talked about the paper, the paper ballot problem before you got on here, but I think you were in the studio. You probably heard us discuss that. Mail-in ballot signatures, and this is one of the key things here that has always been a concern of mine. And that's with the early ballots, guys. We get the ballot. They send us a little card. Do you want to vote early? Yes, I do. Then they send you the ballot, and all you have to do is sign your name to the outside and the date. Now, that's more or less an affidavit of saying, yes, I am Ron Ludders, and here's my signature and so forth. And if anybody challenged it, they could say, well, you signed an affidavit, and you're not Ron Ludders, but you signed that you were Ron Ludders.
Right.
Okay, but the problem is if there's no signature on the envelope, the next question is, should that ballot be counted? Did you just forget? And if so, I mean, this is the future of our country, and you're not real considerate as to if you vote and you're so inconsiderate about it by not signing it. Did you make a informed decision when you did vote?
Well, it's like the saying that that the person says, if there's one word that can describe how I feel, I got to come back to this. If they can't follow the orders that are there, or do they have a rightful place to vote? I guess that's the question.
Well, it is. I've always said, and this was in some of our party elections this last year, because we did in fact vote with a virtual convention to determine who our delegates would be to the Republican National Convention. And the voting was supposed to, as I recall, between 9 and noon. And it lasted till about 9 o'clock at night. And I was pretty frustrated because I stayed by my computer all day because I felt we might go into a second ballot. And, you and I we've worked together for many years, and we're very considerate. I want to make the decisions. I don't want to all of a sudden say, I've spent my hour and a half waiting, goodbye, let somebody else do it. Bottom line is, I've got to thinking, if between 12 and 9 o'clock at night and the voting is over, if you didn't prepare yourself well enough to know how to vote, register to vote, and do your thing, should you really have voted at all? And I'm of the point where are we having a sound problem, or is it just me?
Yeah,
Sounds
I am
out.
too.
Yeah.
I'm knocked out.
So
You out?
It might just be the unit there. Are you kicking the unit?
Lights out. All the microphones are out. So, at any rate, the light is out on, so somebody's tripped over a power cord or hit a power cord. Time out, ladies and gentlemen. Or do I have to first down?
We just speak really loud.
There we go.
Okay, we're back on. We're back on. Thank you, Neil.
So, Alex, I'm curious. So you're seeing, and I know Ron's going to go through a little bit more on this. So you're seeing all these from a legal standpoint, from a legal perspective. If there were this many discrepancies in a case, is it pretty well cut and dried to where, yeah, go ahead and certify it? It's going to be fine.
Well, I mean, nothing's ever cut and dried in the law, right? I think it's early days, right? I mean, certainly, what has come out seems to largely line up with the items that we alleged and the items that we thought when we filed our lawsuit, but only in the sense it doesn't it's what we would expect to see if what we were saying was correct. But still, it's so early that, we have to see the explanations, we have to see the reasoning, we have to see the results of the hand count, and most importantly, in my mind, because this has always been my opinion, is that if there was malfeasance, the real malfeasance was on the machine side. We have to see the machine stuff, which we can't do until the auditors get what they need from the county. So.
And the county's refusing to cooperate once again.
But I think we're moving into the next phase, and Randy, you could probably speak intelligently on this. We've asked for it, they've declined. We've asked for it multiple times, they've declined. Now it's coming to the point where, hey, we've done all the other legwork. We need this to finish the puzzle.
That's correct. And that's what needs to go back to the court and have the court require the county provide that information to us.
Is it, I know in the past that the court had said that the Senate has the ability to enforce this provision.
Yes.
Does it have to go through the court? Does the court have to get involved to then say they have a quote jurisdiction over it?
Well,
maybe it's
that's not my job to answer that question.
Yeah. So the court never said that the Senate had. Well, in a sense, right? The court has never said that the subpoenas will be judicially enforced, right? The court made a declaratory judgment, declared that the subpoenas are valid and lawful and need to be complied with. But the court will not, in my opinion, personal opinion, the court's not going to step in to actually enforce the subpoenas itself. Now the question is, well, then what does it take to have legislative enforcement? One interpretation is that it requires a vote of the body. And certainly the fact that the Senate has already represented to the court, or seemed to represent to the court, hey, we need a vote of the body, would make it pretty hard for them to walk that position back later. I think if you look at the law in a vacuum, there's a decent argument to be made that it actually just requires the Senate president and the chairman of the committee. And if you look at the rules, that certainly seems justified. And, courts have historically been very reluctant to question a legislative body's interpretation of its own rules. And so if the president of the Senate says, oh, this is the way I interpret our rules, in a vacuum, courts would be reluctant to question that. I know that the rules of the chamber seem to allow the Senate president on her own accord to direct the sergeant at arms to enforce the edicts of the body. And so, that's a potential option. But again, it's all of that's a little bit of an uphill battle at this point, with now there being a representation to the court or a seeming representation to the court. Yeah, we need a vote of the body, by taking that vote.
But could she walk that back?
You'd have to do it, and you'd have to find out. Really, that's the only way to do it.
She had made a statement earlier that the body as a whole didn't have the ability to decertify the election. It would have to come from the Attorney General. Do you have anything to say on something like that?
I don't recall the president making a statement quite to that effect. But
Well, I think Randy had an opinion on that as well, as we talked a little earlier. Does the Attorney General, or as the Constitution says, what is it?
The legislature.
I think
It's
it's
the
the legislature. It is not the Attorney General.
I don't think they're involved or mentioned at all. Neither
No.
the Secretary of State.
Not in the
neither
Constitution.
the
It's the
governor.
legislature.
yeah, I would say this though. At this point, and I'm sure some people are going to get mad at me for saying this. At this point, any decertification is likely symbolic, right? And so the legislature can certainly take a symbolic decertification vote and express their opinion that, hey, this election shouldn't have been certified, and it takes away a certain moral legitimacy from the Biden administration. Again, if the results warrant that. At this point, people talk about recalling the electors, and it's like, well, it's like you're recalling the members of 3 Congresses ago. Where would you send the new electors? The college has met, and it's been voted on in Congress. So again, it's this at this point is about just getting the right answer, correcting the problem so that it never happens again, and of course, the legitimacy.
Well, when you look at what has happened over the last six months or so, in the state of our union now, and I'm talking about the federal government, where things were repealed, the issue with immigration and border protection, when you're talking about treaties that were done or that were taken away, but now they're going, the Paris Accord, all of these things that could irreparably damage
Sure.
the people of
Of
the
course.
United States. Would that be a basis for somebody to go, and if multiple states came to it and said, look, this was fraudulent, this is adversely affecting us, we as citizens, we the people, are now demanding, hey, this needs to be corrected.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that there's not ways, if you wanted to make a run at revoking the Biden administration, essentially. I mean, there's certainly ways to do it. Very creative ways, like the ones you just come up with. I've thought of a few myself, but the truth of the matter is they all have a 95% plus chance of failure, to the point where that's not the wagon, the star we should be hitching our wagon to at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on here because we're getting right to the end of this, and then we'll come up with some conclusions, I believe. Okay, so there's missing information on the chain of custody, and you've already
Yes,
spoke to that issue.
correct.
How important the chain of custody, though? Isn't that everything?
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly for what we've been doing on the audit, the chain of custody has been critical, and we've been very, very careful about it and very much focused on making sure we have a chain of custody on all the ballots, on the equipment, as well as the data that's come off of that equipment.
There were some allegations that I briefly looked over in this letter from Congress to Cyber Ninjas that said that the chain of custody was broken by them. Can you speak on that?
Again, they don't have any facts to prove that. They just have basically some reports. One of those is that somehow people were able to get into the building to the ballots. They didn't. They couldn't. There was, and Alex knows this, we had security there, armed security guards from the moment the trucks drove up, before that actually, to deliver the equipment and the ballots. Now, did some reporters sneak in? Yes, they did. Okay, and we caught some of them. We also let some in so they could be up there and watching the audit. Okay, and they went out and they purposely opened the door so they could take a picture and say, look, anybody could get in. This is the press that was doing that. So then we had to assign security to be with the press at all times because obviously they could not be trusted.
So it was really disingenuous for them to try to get a gotcha, right? They were looking for that
Exactly.
gotcha moment. Wow.
Wow, unbelievable. Okay, there's a couple of more issues here. One is the missing serial numbers on the matchup of duplicate ballots.
I heard they were filed off.
No, they weren't that kind. But when you had a disputed ballot and you were going to make another ballot, you had to take the number off the ballot that you were copying to the other ballot and write the serial number on it. So the two should have been simultaneous.
Right.
One goes to be counted again. Then they found that some ballots had duplicate serial numbers that were identical. In that case, it would appear that they were voted twice.
Potentially.
Yeah, I said it would appear.
Yeah.
Just
Again,
appear.
we don't have the facts
Yeah.
because we don't have a chain of custody, nothing provided by the county that could clarify exactly what happened in that situation.
And then, of course, the big one, and this is where we'll come up with the conclusion, and that is these router passwords for the computers, the routers, and so forth do not seem to, well, they haven't been given to the auditors, one, but it does appear from what I have heard, Randy, that the county doesn't even have these passwords, that in fact Dominion has them.
Well, that's what they responded, and I think, again, I think Alex can respond to that because he saw that.
Yeah. Dominion does. They don't give them to their customers, which to me means that the county and by extension the state of Arizona does not actually have control over our elections at all, right? there's this third party private company that does. I would say that this year has been such a rude awakening for me, because I make no bones about it. I come from the libertarian side of the Republican Party, right? And it has been so eye-opening for me to see that there actually isn't this bright line like I idealized between the private sector and the government. It's a shell game, like at the circus, where you've got the 3 cups and you're moving them all around. Oh, which one's the ball under? And so when the government doesn't want to have responsibility for something, they let the private sector keep it and be subject to those protections. And we've got a contract, we're not allowed to get it. It's just it's blows your mind. It really blows your mind.
Wow.
And
Alex, what then was in charge of the election in Maricopa County?
And this is the key question: who ran the election?
I think on those facts, on that simple set of facts, looking at it externally without knowing some of the details, I would say Dominion ran the election. That's what it looks like.
That would be
me.
my conclusion. Dominion ran the election.
And given that we live in a country where it's consent to the governed, I didn't consent to that.
No.
No, but the supervisors did.
And the supervisors, that is dereliction of duty. It is all of those different legal terms. They did not do their job. They did not do diligence, malfeasance. What's the other? There's half dozen feasances.
Well, I don't know that it's a feasance question, but there's something called the non-delegation doctrine.
Yes.
And it to me, it seems that you're really pushing the envelope of it when first you've got a state legislature that delegates the ability to run elections to the county. So okay, it's a little bit of delegation. And then the county delegates it to a private actor. Now you're really pushing the boundaries. And I think this could be a very interesting route for litigation in the future. Just putting a pin in that one. So, yeah.
Now I know, and I don't want to get off the subject, but I do want to leave just a little bit of time. Alex, we had on Kimmy Gonzalez.
Oh, sure.
And she was talking about a lot of U.S. citizens that are now being detained and
In
sometimes
Washington, D.C. jails.
cruel and unusual punishment. They're not being able to face their accusers. They're not being charged with anything. They have no bail. She's fighting very hard. Although the organization started out for election integrity,
Sure.
they've now picked up on this. I want to get your take from a legal standpoint. If this was a client of yours, what could you do to demand that these things, these rights that we have constitutionally, are abided by?
Well, I guess I should start off by saying, criminal law is not a component of my practice, so I've got a sort of limited ability to have.
And I don't mean to put you on the
Yeah,
on the spot.
I sort of have a
that.
limited ability to opine on it. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, there's tools that the criminal defense bar has to challenge all of these sorts of things, assuming that what you've presented is accurate in terms of the Eighth Amendment, in terms of petitions for writs of habeas corpus. But you're really going to want to ask a criminal lawyer that question.
Okay. I'm just mind-boggled that in this day and age, that these rights are not given to citizens when we see them on videotape where they did not forcibly go in, where they're saying prayers from the chamber. I mean, can you get them on trespassing?
Well,
maybe, but I don't know.
And if I could sort of bring that into a larger point, which is often as conservatives we're guilty of this, is sometimes the left does make decent points every once in a while, every once in a blue moon, that we don't realize till the shoe's on the other foot. So, problems with the conditions of people who are jailed subject to trial, problems with the difficulties getting bond, in terms of the poor due process that you get in the criminal system. Some on the left and many on the right, by the way, for the past 10 years have been complaining about these things. And it's interesting that it takes something like this for the wider conservative movement to really see it and accept it. And actually, I think that long term, that's going to be a really positive thing for our country to get more focus on these issues.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot. This is not over with by any means.
And it's not black and white either.
But, we have a press here that keeps talking about how stupid everybody is out here and how unconventional we are and the results are the results. It amazes me that there was a day when the press would be wanting to know these things and report what really went on to the American people. And I think they've lost their way in this process, and they have now become a political arm of the left.
And where's the ACLU with all of this?
Yeah,
You
well, there
you
was a
would think.
day, I think, Randy, you remember those days when the ACLU would jump on any free speech issue. I mean, they were just there, and now we've seen all types of things here, and you hear crickets. There's nothing there. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll see here coming up. We've Randy, any estimate in terms of when we'll see a finished report?
Yeah, we're finishing up the actual physical work next week, and I believe that they started working on actually drafting the report about 10 days ago. And then obviously some of that came out on Thursday. I think they'll be finished with it by the middle of August, the report. At least they'll have the draft report that'll go to the Senate for review at a minimum.
And will they have this available for everybody to read? Are they going to do another session like they did before to let people know this is what we found out?
Well, I don't know that answer. That's left up to the Senate how they want to handle that. Clearly you're going to get the draft report. They'll go through the draft report and they'll finalize their report. And then if they want to release it, I assume it probably will be released just based on what's been going on, as well as there may be a hearing on it.
Do you think this will end up in court?
Well, it's called a forensic audit for purpose because everything we did in this audit was done in such a way that it could be presented in court legally if necessary. It really kind of will come back to what the final outcome is of the report. What do you think, Alex?
I think one way or the other, it's going to end up in court for something. I don't know what that is quite yet, but one way or the other.
I'm curious, Alex, while you're here, there was a ruling just recently on DACA. I know we're coming off the subject just a little bit, but a federal judge came out and said what President Obama did was unconstitutional because he basically rewrote the immigration law.
Sure.
And President Trump said that he was going to withdraw DACA, and everybody was up in arms, and we went through that. And now we're back to the other side where he's saying that it's not going to happen. So are we yielding too much power to the judicial system to make these decisions? Where do you see this happening?
So this is something I've been thinking a lot about, right? I don't know that we're yielding too much power to the judicial system. What I think is that we have yielded far too much power to judges, right? America was predicated on the idea that the normal and general way that cases would be decided is through a jury trial, right? Where a panel of average, ordinary citizens could sit as the ultimate judge of the law and the facts and pass judgment. When you judges are by nature an elite, right? And so over the years, the power to hear and decide cases has become aggregated more and more to the judges and not to the juries. And as a consequence, you have cases being decided far more from an elite perspective, an elite mentality, instead of by ordinary citizens. And I think that's the cause of a lot of drift in the judiciary that you see these days.
Wow.
The thing that does bother me is so many of these judges are appointed by political parties. We know that a lot of the federal, all of the federal judges are appointed by the president. Of course, they have an advice and consent of the Senate, which today, I remember a day, Randy, you probably do too, no matter what party that the judge was from, they would just about get 80 or 90% of the Senate to support them. Today, it's just marginal. It's almost straight down party lines, and I think some of like our current Garland today is the AG of the United States. I think he's very partisan, extremely partisan,
Extraordinarily.
and even more so. And I thought Barr had a certain certain agenda, but much worse than Barr.
Well, the problem is that Democrats are very good at picking partisans to serve in the judiciary and in the Justice Department. Republicans, we're very bad at it. Anybody we pick who we think is a partisan doesn't end up being. And everybody the Democrats pick who they think is a partisan ends up being. So,
Well, do you think a lot of this has to do, especially with when somebody is brought to the Senate for a hearing? The Senate used to be selected by the states. The state would take two people, send them out there. They were nonpartisan. They weren't a Republican, a Democrat. They were there specifically. This is pre-17th Amendment. They were there specifically to represent the interests of the state. So we didn't get that problem. Now it's just right against left, right against left, right against blue. They're pounding each other. And they can't come to any agreement because they're all on one side or the other. Do you find that's the case?
I've seen various things on the 17th Amendment. One sort of counter argument that really resonated with me from the conservative perspective was that prior to the 17th Amendment, that's all state legislatures ever focused on, was who was going to be the senator, and they never actually focused on state legislation. Which resonates with me. I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's something that bears more analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see this changing anytime soon, but I do see people beginning to wake up, Ray, to a lot of this stuff. And one of two things can happen: either people can become more involved in the future of their country, or less involved. That's scary. I think just a simple fact, as we had talked to Kimmy Gonzalez, the simple fact that we have American citizens that haven't been charged for anything sitting in the pokey in Washington, D.C., and members of neither party are there just screaming and yelling and saying you're taking the rights away from these individuals, and that we, the people, are the ones that have to be screaming about this instead of our elected officials, which ought to be leading the charge. I don't see that happening. And as you heard Kimmy say, here was the deal. We had, I think she said, 9 events this week with the one at Scottsdale Studios. That's 10 events. And we had one congressman attend only one of 10
happening
events.
Around the country.
And yes, and only one congressman, and that was our dear Paul Gosar.
Yep.
Thank you for your service there, sir.
Yes, absolutely.
It's commendable. And we ought to, as a party, we ought to be, and this is not a partisan issue, that people's rights be observed. And it's a terrible thing as far as I'm concerned, because once again, if it can happen to them, it can happen to us.
That's right, and we are here to protect individual rights,
Yes.
individual liberties, individual freedoms, not the collective.
Exactly.
We need to be looking out for the individual.
And, we have all these amendments. I mean, you had the First Amendment, which we know was violated. That's the peaceful. And these people, for the most part, were peaceful. And, then you had the Fifth Amendment. You don't have to testify against yourself. You have the Sixth Amendment, which gives you the speedy and fair trial. And then the Eighth Amendment says no unusual punishment. Some of these people are in solitary confinement, haven't even been charged with a crime.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
I have a feeling that as we rediscover the Bill of Rights as a conservative movement, the left may conveniently forget a few of them. It's scary times for sure. I mean, hell, they trying to throw Kelly Ward in jail for just pure speech right now. So it's weird.
Well, listen to that. We've got music, and I know Randy is salivating because I understand that I'm sitting next to him. I can hear his stomach growling.
It's dinner time.
He hasn't
man.
had dinner yet. Neither have I. And so you're going to get to go home and eat dinner. Randy, we really thank you for
Yes,
all the
thank
service
you.
that
Thank
you've
you.
done.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You have done a yeoman's task, as has Ken Bennett.
Yeah.
And
Please
God
thank Ken
bless you
for us
guys.
as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you,
And
Neil,
congratulations,
for running
Alex,
on your baby
Yeah,
Bouncing
thank
baby.
you.
and running for the legislature.
Thank
as
you.
well.
Right, yes.
And so
luck.
Somebody's got to make sure this country is still here when he gets to be my age. So.
we're going to be back Wednesday night here on Hub Radio, and we're going to be here fighting back with Mr. Ray Michaels.
Yes.
And
And Ron Ludders.
And Josh Bernstein.
Yes.
Unchained.
Josh Bernstein,
Unchained?
uncensored.com.
Oh, uncensored.
Not Unchained, uncensored.com.
Okay. You mean we're going to unchain him? Okay, we'll see you then.
Thanks,
Hope you
Scottsdale
enjoyed the
Studios.
show.
Thank you, Sue.
Bye now.